really excited to have Stacey Abate on with us. I'm going to read a little bit from Stacey's bio that we had out on the website. Stacey has been a grants professional since 1997. She's raised approximately $70 million. I'm going to say that again, $70 million from all types of foundations and government agencies. Stacey has been a grants consultant since 2000 and was the founding president of the Grant Professionals Association New Jersey chapter. Stacey joined Rutgers University in 2016 to teach grant writing and share her expertise with the next generation of nonprofit professionals. So Stacey has a great presentation for you today. Thank you so much, Stacey, for joining us.
Jody, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the warm introduction. It's nice to be here with all of you. I'll drop my contact information in the chat a little bit later towards the end. I'll also keep an eye on the chat even when I start to screen share, but I will trust Jody to interrupt me if there are any questions that you want me to stop or talk more about at the time. I am with the Grant Professionals Association, and I think that's how Jody got my name. I am with Rutgers. I'm full-time faculty in the English department. I do teach grant writing. I'm within the writing program, so I teach an undergraduate and a graduate section. I teach writing for nonprofits, which I designed because over the past 20 years, I've been asked to do a lot of things that aren't grants. And so I want to make sure that whatever you need your incoming workforce to be doing, they are prepared for that. So that class, those students have done an annual appeal and a newsletter, and their final coming up in the next few weeks is they're creating organizational case statements. So hopefully you will have, as you're prepared to hire some new assistants and associates, hopefully I've adequately prepared them all for you. I've been at Rutgers full-time just since last year, which may not have been the ideal time for a major career transition. So I have remained doing grant writing as well. I'm a staff grant writer for RWJ Barnabas Health, and I have a consulting practice I'm in Ocean County, but my clients are all over the country where I do grants that are not healthcare related, obviously, for clients all around. I have written for like WISE and Boys and Girls Clubs and domestic violence and sexual violence and food insecurity and all kinds of things since 1997. I will correct one thing Jody said, and she said $70 million. I actually think I need to update that to 60 because here's a funny story that's not funny. In the fall, I wrote at the time, which was my largest grant, was $17 million. And that was huge. And then we got the award letter, it was $20 million. And that's when I foolishly updated my LinkedIn because that's huge, $20 million. And then some months later, I got a letter from the state titled Grant Rescind. And I was like, what is that? I've never seen that before. And the state had decided that they wanted to reevaluate how they had made these awards. And so they pulled back all the money, which we hadn't started spending because I have worked with the state before. And so we waited a minute, and a minute was 6 months. And then just this last week, we got a new letter that said, okay, we changed our mind. Everybody's getting money, but we have used an entirely different formula to allocate it. And so now we're getting 8 million and change, which is great. And I may have been happy about that the first time, but now I still have in my possession the original $20 million award letter. So I'm mad about this $8 million. But that feels like how things have been going lately. To me, that feels like very 2020, and I really had high hopes for 2021, but it's like 2020, the sequel. But what we are seeing, and I'll talk about more in a minute, is more money. Whereas at this time last year, it was like a panic, right? Everybody was, and anytime any kind of disaster comes, I'm like, well, there goes all the money. Like after 9/11, there was Homeland Security, and then after Katrina. But now the disasters happen so much more frequently that it's not as big of an interruption in fundraising, but it is when it was something this big. So all of us in healthcare were like frantic, like working flat out this time last year, because all of a sudden we were all looking for all the same things, not just money, but PPE and all of that. And then in the summer and into the fall, things sort of calmed down. And I foolishly thought they would stay calm, but no, now we're seeing this like tsunami of money. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. I'm going to hijack your screens now and start screen sharing. So fair warning. So the reason that I'm here, particularly today, but the Grant Professionals Association, I just want you to be aware that we are here to support you. We support each other, but in supporting each other, we're here to support you, our nonprofits. So the link is there, and I'm happy to share these slides after. Jody will take care of that. But there is our national association and our New Jersey chapter that Jody mentioned I was the founding president of. I'm the current vice president. And we have an annual conference that we host. It's May 21st. You're all invited. I'll drop the link to that in the chat at the end as well. So let's talk about your nonprofits. Jody had mentioned that all of your nonprofits, there is a huge variety. There are 38,000 nonprofits in New Jersey. And so they range right from the PTA to our giant healthcare systems, and Rutgers is a nonprofit. So they super range the gamut, small, medium, and large. So is your nonprofit grant ready? When a new client calls me and says, will you write for me? These are some of the first things I ask them. Well, can you send me your 501c3? Are you registered with your state? What is your mission statement? How will you demonstrate success? Do you have some previous evaluation reports you can share with me? And then let's talk about financial management. If you're not big enough to have a big, like there are different levels of audit. So what kind of audits do you have? Can I see them? Will you share with me your 990? And what do you mean you haven't ever filed one? So those are some immediate, when organizations are taken aback or are unwilling to share or just don't know, these are the things that we look for when we consider, are you grant ready? And this demonstrate success thing, that's not like, for me, I'm sure you are successful, but how can we prove it to a donor? How can we prove it to a funder? Because they're going to ask. Now, some funders have requirements that we can't even apply for the grant unless you've been around for, it depends, 2, 3, 5 years. So, but these are the very basic things you have to have in order. Oh, but let's step back. There are two kinds of ways we can look at a grant. Public, I like public money. I like writing. I'm a federal grant specialist because these are a lot of work. So I need there to be enough zeros to make it worthwhile. So public is the way the government funds ideas and projects, right? They know what kind of needs to be done. And so they issue these grants in order to get the money out the door through all of the different federal agencies and then state agencies as well. The state has its own money, plus it gets some of that money that Michelle was talking about will eventually find its way into state agencies to be re-granted through the State Department of Education or Health or Department of Mental Health, Addiction Services, whatever. Privately, these are our corporations and our private foundations. They have a bit more flexibility, right? They want to support particular programs in their interest areas, whether that be healthcare or youth or food insecurity or whatever. But those decisions are made internally by the foundation or corporate giving people or a family, that works together, whatever. Whereas these public grants are typically awarded by the federal or the public agency, but frequently there is a more transparent peer review process. Frequently, federal agencies are required to do peer review. I did peer review for 20 years. The last year I did it was in 2017. I've reviewed for education, justice, health and human services, and I may go back to doing that again. The way they had done it changed over the past few years so that it wasn't as objective as it used to be. So here's hoping that we get back to that more objective, less political review process for public grants. GPA works with GrantStation and a few other sponsors. Each year they issue a state of grant seeking report. All grant people are invited to participate in the survey. We just started the 2021 surveying to see how it's going. These are the most common sources of funding for our nonprofits. None of this should surprise you. Private foundations and then community foundations, corporate grant makers. The federal government is only 42%. Now, this is sources of funding, not so much amount of funds. The amount of funds later in the report, there's all these different tables and charts that talk about how much is your smallest award, your largest award, because all of it matters to you, right? The smallest grants I've written are like $1,500 sponsorships for events. And I told you earlier about my $8 million award. Everything in between matters, right? All of this income matters. The report also talks about the challenges in grant seeking. So lack of time and or staff, of course, because everybody is doing one more thing. And frequently grants, for as many organizations as have a grant writer, there's 3 times as many that don't. I made that number up. There's just not enough of us. And everybody is being asked to do one more thing. Competition, of course, is great. Research, it doesn't seem like so much the writing is the issue as finding the time, and the competition is serious. I'm hoping this year Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Competition is still going to be serious. Research and finding grants, I'll show you where some of those are. They're not exactly hidden, but they're not exactly super publicized either. Funder practices and requirements, yeah, there's no getting around that. There is no point in sending your fantastic domestic violence program to somebody who has only said, I want to fund healthcare. And you can say as much as you want that domestic violence is a public health issue, and it is, and I can say that, but they have really said they want to fund healthcare. So let's not waste our time. Let's match up our funding sources with your programs that have the best chance of being funded. The competition is so stringent, so tight, that it's just not worth your time to just keep throwing things out there and seeing what sticks. Has been some organizations' philosophy for a while, like throwing spaghetti at the wall or something. That is not a good use of your time. Be strategic, be targeted about what you're applying for and when, because the competition is serious. You don't have time to waste just randomly sending stuff out. However, you're talking about a lot of money. I'm sure you've seen this. It's from Giving USA. It's from 2019. They're like a year behind. But look how much money we're talking about. I care about this 17% giving by foundations. That was 75, almost $76 billion, with another 21 billion giving by corporations. That's a lot of money. There is a lot of money out there. 69% of that giving is by individuals, and that's for your major gift officers. That's not my wheelhouse. I'm gonna stay in my lane and focus on this giving by foundations and giving by corporations. So there is money there. We just have to make sure we're matching it properly to your organizations, to your projects. So let's talk about just private money. There are corporate foundations locally. The TD Bank Foundation is a good example of a corporate foundation. Family foundations, again, thinking locally, the Grunin Foundation is a strong family foundation, does a lot throughout the state of New Jersey. Independent foundations would be sort of like the medium of that. Like now I would consider the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation in Northern New Jersey, who funds a lot of arts and environmental programs, to be an independent foundation. There's not like Grunin has a small family that oversees and makes their awards. It's not like that at all. It is a board of directors, a professional staff. There's an application process. I don't have to wonder how to break in because it's very transparent. It's up on their website. There's an RFP process, very, very easily able to understand what they want to fund and when. And same with our corporate foundations. Those things tend to comprehensive grant applications. Their websites tend to be comprehensive and explain exactly what they're looking for, what they want to fund. And I just want to say for like the fourth time, you can only apply for what they want to fund. Yes, I understand that like Bank of America has a lot of money, but they're pretty clear they want it to go toward housing and veterans. So there's really not worth our time to submit them a healthcare proposal. So when somebody tells you what they want to fund, believe them. We can send an email to double check. Sometimes they issue you can find a phone number, get them on the phone, right? People give to people. If you can make those relationships, all the better. But don't waste your time trying to talk them into funding something that is clearly not what they have stated they want to fund. Now we'll talk about public grants because they're my favorite. Yesterday, I did some research for you on grants.gov. If you have never been on grants.gov, it's actually fairly user-friendly to search. I clicked, and I put this to show you. What I clicked on was search grants. And then instead of putting in any keywords, because I knew we'd have a diverse group, I just checked the box for posted, just wanted a grant, just wanted it to be open to nonprofits with 501c3. I clicked all categories. Oh, but then I narrowed it down to education and health and human services. And just yesterday, there were 844 grants posted. And they range, I can't see my screen, but I sorted them by when they are due. So these all have upcoming due dates. And you can see Promise Neighborhoods is a huge initiative from Department of Ed. It's been around for a while, but it doesn't release every year. So it's a big deal that it's out now. A lot of health and human services, a lot of research. All these actually look, now that I'm looking closer, at a lot of clinical trials, which may be appropriate for some of our hospitals, for Rutgers, some of our research institutions. But just in those two categories of education, health and human services, there are currently 844. Now, that's more than usual. I will tell you that I work with an organization that I've worked with for a couple of years. They hire me only for very specific projects. We wrote one last year called CCBHC. It's like a community-based integrated mental and physical health project. Last year, that competition made 98 awards. which is great. 98 is like 2 per state, right? So I'm happy with that. This year, when she sent me the RFP and said, will you work with us again? I look at the RFP and I think there's a typo, because it says this year they're making, and it's not CCVHT, but it's a very similar type of competition, open to the same type of community providers. But this year they're making up to 825 awards. And so I looked at it again, I'm like, well, that must be wrong. And no, it's not. They're making up to 825 awards. And when I looked into it, it's because SAMHSA, the federal agency, Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, just got like $7 billion. So now they need to grant that money out. So then I got a little bit scared, because if SAMHSA has that much money, everybody else must be starting to have a lot of money too. So now I'm a little bit worried, where I thought I'd be taking some time off in this summer. Perhaps I was wrong. But because 825 is a lot. So if you were thinking about when is a good time, I want to do a federal grant, but it's such a heavy lift. It is, but now might be the time to consider it, because I have not seen this much money this fast since 2009, when we did the Recovery Act under the first Obama administration. Then they were desperately, remember, shovel ready was the phrase then. They were desperately pushing money out the door then. I have not seen this much money since then, and I didn't see this much even then. So now is a good time to be looking for federal money. All right, so that's all. I'll stop for 1 second and just to see if I could add, to say one more thing and see if there's any questions before I move on. Grants.gov, by the way, is the best place for you to find federal grants, all federal grants. The application process, you should be able to apply through grants.gov, but some of these federal agencies have like a rogue shadow system they like to use now. But everything at least gets posted in grants.gov. So this is where you look for all federal grants. Unfortunately, the state does not have the same type of one-stop clearinghouse. So like state grants that would come through education or Health and Human Services or DMOS, with Department of Mental Health, are not all in one place. You have to look at those agencies all separately. But the federal government has this grants.gov for us. There is a similar portal. For some reason, I don't have a slide of it, but for private money, which would be, you've heard of the Foundation Center. The Foundation Center merged with GuideStar, and now it's called Candid, but it still exists in the same way. And so towards the end, I have a link in the slide to show you where to go for that. Foundation Center access is very expensive. So some of your smaller nonprofits may not want to pay. It's very expensive, but you already have access through our state library system. So there is a library near you that has access. And that's where all of your private money and corporate money is all there for you to research. So that's where the money is. Now I want to talk for a second about, okay, great. I found this great thing. I want to apply for Promise Neighborhoods. Now what? This is the entire grant cycle. We right now have just been talking about 1 and 2. First, we got to define what your need is. You need to research. Now I research grant opportunities. You need to do some internal research on your program. I can make the case for need. You don't have to convince me of that. What you have to do is tell me what you're going to do about it. How is your solution research-based, evidence-based? How do you know that that solution is best for that community? Hopefully you have talked to that community, right? Because we're not telling our communities what they need. We are working with them to help them get what they need. So all of that is that research and preparation. The apply is the easy part, right? The narrative isn't even the hard part. It's everything surrounding it. Number 5 is your favorite. It's when you get your award. Number 6 is when you are really managing it, keeping in touch. Number 7 is when I come to file your report and you say, oh, I didn't actually do that. And that's when I get a little bit upset, because what do you mean you didn't do that? And I could tell you story after story where somebody said, I really need this money, and we get the money, and then they don't spend the money, or they spend it on something else. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Clients call me all the time and say, will you just write this so we can get it? Yeah, I could do that. But what if you get it? Then you're going to have to do it exactly like I wrote it. So don't be cavalier about these things. When what you write down in your application, they will hold you to. And I don't mean like a little bit of like, well, we thought we'd hire 3 people, we only hired 2. Yeah, that's fine. But you still need to achieve the goals that we set out. So pro tip, set your goals to be achievable. If you know you're going to serve 500 people a year easy, maybe say we're going to serve 425. Then when you hit 510, you have exceeded that goal. I'll talk more about that right here, because this is all of the elements of your proposal. Some of it, they're all important. So just because the abstract is first and the budget is last, that doesn't make the budget less important. When I've done peer review with people who insist that they start with the budget, because if they can't tell what your project is from the budget and the budget narrative, they're not interested in reading your program, your narrative. We, as grant writers especially, we focus so much on the narrative, and it's like beautiful, but it doesn't always correlate with what your organizational capacity or what your budget has said. So never leave the budget to the end, and check your budget, like check simple things like math, and make sure that whatever is in your budget, whatever final budget number, is the exact same number that showed up in your cover page and on your abstract. Those few things, because you wrote one thing at some point and forgot to update it once you got to the budget, if it's not all exactly the same, it just looks sloppy, and it just raises red flags where there don't need to be any, right? You need this stuff to be as perfect, as proofread, as perfectly as possible. These are the main things. If you learn nothing else today, it's follow the directions and meet the deadline. That's it. This is not rocket science, right? You just follow the directions. People get anxious about federal RFPs, requests for proposals, because they are so dense. And there's like the beginning is the purpose and the legislation, and it's kind of like just wow. But once you get to the actual selection criteria that has the directions, follow them. Absolutely. I did one a few weeks ago for a hospital that it was 40 pages. It was all I was allowed to submit, including the resumes and the job descriptions and the logic model. 40 pages altogether. That's actually not that many pages. So I had to, curiously, this was through HRSA, Health Resource Service Administration, and it didn't have a page limit on the narrative. It just had a total page limit. So once I backed into it, eliminating all of the things I was required to attach, like the table, like the different charts and CVs and everything, I really only had like 20 pages left for the narrative. So that's fine. Then I made sure I didn't exceed them. They were very clear. They're going to throw out anything over 40 pages. So I did not submit even 41. Or don't give them a reason to disqualify you. These grants are competitive. I did a peer review some years ago where they only made 10 awards nationwide. And the scoring for federal agencies score on like a 100-point scale usually, except EPA uses 225, but most of them use 100. And so you needed to get 100. The agencies I read for that got a 99 were rejected. Now, if I'm the grant writer and I get my comments back and it's a 99 and a rejection, I'm not that happy, because there's really nothing much I can do to improve that for the next year. At that point, my negative comments are like not really nothing that I could do that much better. So 100 is really your goal. You can't skimp because the competition is so tight right now. Only include what they're asking you for. Follow the subheadings. Sometimes the headings in the RFP make no sense to you because you really think you should talk about the need first and then the project. I read one as an external reviewer for a friend last week that started with the sustainability. And that makes no sense to me, but that is what that state wanted. They wanted you to start with saying how you're going to continue it after this grant. So they started with the sustainability section, even though that makes no sense. Include everything they ask for, every heading, the tables, charts, graphs. Be positive. You have to explain the need, but you don't want to be so pathetic that there's no way you could fix that with $50,000, $100,000. So, and keep it realistic, right? A lot of our nonprofits, especially now, are addressing food insecurity. So talk about addressing food insecurity for families within, this county. You're not going to end world hunger, right? That's too big. Bring it to what you can actually do with $100,000 or however much you're asking for in a certain amount of time. And make sure that a stranger knows what you're talking about. Avoid jargon and acronyms, no matter what field you're from, healthcare, education. I did some reentry work. Everybody's got their own acronyms and everybody thinks they know exactly what GPA or exactly what means. You don't, you have to, as a peer reviewer, they bring us in to read from all different variety of fields. So although I most often do education, justice, health and human service, administration, children, and families, my personal background is education. So when I come in to do something for ORR, Office of Refugee Resettlement, I've never really worked in there. So I don't appreciate when there's all these jargons and stuff, that all these acronyms that they haven't explained, and I hold it against them. You need to explain everything in your narrative so that a lay reader will understand it. You cannot assume that everybody is in your same field. check the grammar and spelling. I mean, proofread. And the best way to find those typos, right, is you hit submit. And then the next day when you pull it up to share it with the rest of your team, that's when you see the typos. Happened to me just this week, actually. The reason I put these links in, which all worked as of yesterday, is because I figured I would share these slides with you, or Jody will rather. They all work. The Center for Nonprofits, I can't say enough about. Linda Zippo and Debbie Duncan and her very small but mighty team are fantastic. They are our biggest resource in this state. I love them. They're wonderful. Grants.gov, besides just searching for grants, there is an entire, they actually do a nice job. They have a lot of like really short readings, YouTube tutorials, not just on how to use grants.gov, but on the federal grants process and how to apply, when to apply, what to look for. So I mentioned the Foundation Center has merged with GuideStar into Candid. I'm sure that all made sense at the time. And so candid.org is your new repository. They have also a lot of resources there. You have to click around. Not everything is exactly where it used to be or where you think it should be, but there are a lot of resources, again, on how to write certain sections, where to look for certain things. And that is your gateway into the Foundation Center directory, Foundation Center Online, which is your search portal for finding grant opportunities. And there's cool things you could do with like different search features and mapping. And just because this organization says they only fund in Morris County, look at all the grants that are in Ocean County. Maybe it is worth a try. So the Foundation Center is definitely worth your time. All Things Grants is our grants professionals. That's our networking and our professional association. You're more than welcome to join us. That's my email. I totally was not keeping an eye on time. So I trust Jody as far as what time we have. I'm here for you for questions. I'll stop sharing. Oh no, wait. I lied. Look, there's the save the date. I wanted to put that there for you as well. Now I think that's the last slide. Yep, that is our upcoming conference. So it's May 21st. You're all welcome. I'm going to drop the link in the chat so that you can check out the full agenda online. And now I talk probably too fast and I apologize. And what questions do you have for me?
That was great, Stacey. Thank you so, so much. And there's so much great information. So there has to be questions. So I'd love to be able to give Stacey some of the questions that you may have. I know that a lot of you are not on camera, but I'm going to ask a question. If you could raise your hand, I'd love to see it. I think it'd be good for Stacey to see too. So how many on here actually have a grant writer on staff? So if you're not on camera, you can do one of those. Okay. So how many, whether you're on camera or not, you can raise your hands. How many would love to have? Okay, we'll let that go down for a second because the ones that just clicked up, not that many. I went through the pages, maybe 8 if we're lucky. Let those go down. How many of you wish you had a grant writer? Diana has 2 hands up. Okay, definitely more hands on that one. So that's why it's really important to connect with organizations like the organization Stacey is a part of, and learn more and meet people like Stacey. So while I was doing that, I want to see if any questions, anybody has a question or comment that they would like to share with Stacey at this point. All right. So Stacey, let me ask, you said that there's I'll ask you one. And you said that there's a lot of money out there. And I know for changing my hat to my nonprofit hat that I wear as being the CEO of the Zach Giapler Kids Foundation, what would be the first step? Do you think so is the first step to go to that grants.gov to take a look and see what grants are out there for organizations like, and that now I'm talking with a smaller grant hat, a smaller nonprofit hat.
How small is small?
So under $1 million.
Oh, that's fine. So that's your challenge with federal grants, is that some of them, the budgets are so huge that it would overwhelm your organization. So just be careful about that, because there will be a financial, like an organizational capacity section that you're going to have to explain why, if your annual budget is $1 million, you're asking for a grant for $2 million. So that is my only caution with federal grants. There may be a state grant that is a more appropriate interim step for you in the meantime. Plus, the reporting requirements on a federal grant are extensive. So those smaller nonprofits, it may be best to like leverage partnerships, work together. Collaboration is our favorite buzzword, and funders like it, the government likes it. That may be a better tack to take your first time around, if you do not have a history of federal grants. The agencies themselves are fairly open as long as you're an established nonprofit and, you know, have everything, except for like National Science Foundation, NIH, they're really hard to break into. But all of these other agencies are not. So if you can manage it, if this is something that you're going to be happy about when you get, and not go, oh my God, what have we done? Just really think it through. You could at least just click around grants.gov to sort of get an idea of what would be appropriate for your organization. It's not like you have to register, or, you know, it wouldn't cost you anything to just sort of check it out and keep an eye. One of the reasons that I did peer review for so long was I would always agree to peer review for something that I knew I would be applying for like next year, or that I had a client or an organization that should be applying for. If I did the review for it, then I could see what they were really looking for. And I would get to talk to the program officer and see what the funded projects look like. Then when I went to write it myself the year later, I was much more prepared. So that is another, the agencies are always, I was just anticipating that question about the peer review process. So the agencies are always looking for peer reviewers. Typically there are, and this is like a generality, but typically there will be three of you would get assigned the same group of 10 applications. You'll read it and score it individually. And then you would come together for a, like now it would probably be a virtual conference call like this to kind of argue amongst yourself, because maybe you took points off in the evaluation section, but maybe you just didn't understand it. Whereas the third person is an evaluator. And so they said, no, that's really there on page 14. And this is what they meant. And then you agree to like change your score a little bit till you come to a consensus score for that particular application. As to how you got involved, well, some years ago, it used to be that you would apply directly to the agencies, but now they subcontract all of that work. And there are a few vendors in DC that kind of, that take care of all of that. Some of them actually publicize, some of the agencies do too. They just started recruiting now for the season. We typically review in the summer. There's a lot of these reviews happen in the summer. So I have just in the past month gotten maybe 3 solicitations so far to be a peer reviewer for this upcoming summer. But the easiest thing to do is to go pick what you would think you would want to learn about, read about, like administration, children, youth and families. It depends on what your area of interest is. Go to the grant you wanted to apply for, but not yet. Find the program officer and ask and say, hey, I'd like to apply to be a peer reviewer. And then they'll say, oh, FB is, whoever vendor is organizing that for us. Here's how you contact them. These are, especially the federal agencies, these are public employees. Their phone numbers are public. You can find them and they will answer your questions. So just start out. But some of the agencies have it right on their websites. Administration of Children and Families had it posted right on their website that they were recruiting for peer reviewers. I had said on a slide that when you were grant ready, one of the things you needed was to be able to demonstrate success. That could be as simple as, do you have an annual report? Are you tracking how many people you served last year and what changed for them? What were their outcomes? If you are doing food insecurity, how many pounds of food did you share? How many families did you help register for SNAP? Anything that you can document. So that demonstration of success varies wildly throughout our organizations, but it's whatever you should be tracking what you're doing. Sometimes we get so busy, we forget to enter things into the database. Try not to do that, because I'm sure you're all doing good work, but if you're not tracking it, it's hard for me to prove it. So the simple, start simple, right? An annual report, something like that I could attach to an application that shows how many people you served from what kind of an, organization over the past year. There are some questions in the chat about consulting and finding me. Some of us are easy to find, some of us aren't. So I have been employed over the years as full-time staff person, a part-time person, and as a consultant. So here in New Jersey, there are about 60 members of the Grant Professionals Association, and about a third of us do consulting, either full-time, like I used to just be a full-time consultant. Now I don't have as much time since I'm otherwise occupied. But so GPA really, what happens now, I can tell you, is it happened yesterday. Somebody texted me about an organization in Cape May that was looking for a grant writer. I said, it can't be me, but I'll help you find somebody. And so by the end of the day, like I know a lot of the other consultants, I'm happy. And if that one that I was recommending hadn't worked out, I would have put it out to GPA. There was an announcement came through our internal email yesterday about a law enforcement organization needing help writing a COPS grant. So we all share amongst ourselves, because there are some of us, like I'm happy to write for a wide variety of organizations. I've submitted to HUD and EPA and education and a lot of them, but some of us specialize and only do housing or only do environment. So it just really depends on what your nonprofit needs. And like, well, if it's me, I'll try and help you match with the best, consultant in that field.
Stacey, just a quick question.
Yeah.
If you're trying to start out as a grant writer, though, if that's like that somebody might be looking to do outside of what they're currently doing right now, what would you say would be their first steps that they would need to take to do that?
My first step is reconsider. No, don't just because so that depends also, and that actually is the same sort of question as, do my students need internships? So yes, that breaking in that first job is really hard. I have graduated some students who are anxious to come and join us in the field, but anytime we publish a job announcement, we're asking for like 2 to 5 years of experience. So those first couple of years, my students are really struggling. I have like fantastic students that graduated, certainly the class of 2020, but even before that really do struggle to get that first job. And I would think it's the same as far as changing if you're current, but if you're already working as an employee of a nonprofit, especially a smaller one, I would bet you have been pulled into this a little bit at some point. So you already have some of that experience to fall back on. We hired at the RWJ Barnabas Health, the most recent hire we did for a grant writer. She is young, significantly younger than me, but she was already working, but grants weren't her full-time thing. She was like doing grants and events and some other stuff like many of us do at smaller nonprofits. So then when she took this job, now she's full-time grant writing. So, there is a career path. It's just not always the same. Nobody my age did this on purpose, right? We all fell into it, or were doing something else and then kept getting asked to write grants. And so then it just became our job. But younger people, I am trying to encourage all of my students. I post job opportunities and internship opportunities all semester, because there are not enough of us. I mean, I get emails and calls all the time from somebody looking for a consultant, or where can they find one? I think there's just not enough of us. So I always fall back on GPA. And if it's a client from another state, then I put it out to GPA's national organization, because there are consultants in every state. And since the whole world is virtual now, people seem to be over having to hire somebody that's local to them. I mean, I've worked with people in, Alaska, Hawaii, California, like all over the place.
I have to say, I get calls weekly on people asking me if I know a grant writer. And yes, that is for sure. And that's the one thing I feel like there's totally a shortage of. You said there's people that are part of the association with you?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the thing is with the consultants, many of us are overextended because there's not enough of us. So we do share, job announcements with each other. My students, the one other thing is my students in both my grant writing and my nonprofit class are required to pick a nonprofit that they then work with the whole semester. Sometimes they are actually embedded in that nonprofit, meaning that, well, all that means now is that you have agreed that, yes, I'll work with this student, I'll give them information. And then at the end of the semester, they present you with the final grant proposal, and then you decide if it's worth, what you want to do with it. An A in my class means it is ready for you to submit, not that you wouldn't still have to do, like, make sure it's in your right proper format and on your letterhead and everything. But I do try to match my students with actual nonprofits. But sometimes they come up with ones I never heard of. That's one of my favorite parts. It's like, did you know? I learned this semester about the Trenton Circus Squad. That's like a nonprofit that provides like a different type of therapeutic, particularly for children with autism in circus. I've never heard of that. It's fantastic. So like, there are 38,000 nonprofits here in New Jersey. Like, they are all over the place.
That is for sure. And I know about the Trenton Circus.
Oh, I didn't. It was fantastic.
So other people shaking their heads. So that's amazing. So we have like one more minute here, and there's a question. Do you have a list of nonprofits interested in being paired, and how can we be a part of that list?
Just send me an email, because I'm teaching. I have 2 sections in the fall already. So that right there, that's 44 students that need something to write about. So if you are interested in working, I put my email in there earlier. I'm happy, to suggest and have them partner with one of you.
Well, there's 31 of us on here, so
Yep.
you might be getting 31 different out of
That's
the,
fine. There's an office at Rutgers also. If you need, besides just grant writing, there is an office at Rutgers, just changed its name. Now it's the Collaborative, but that is their job, is to help students work with nonprofits in all different ways. Like sometimes they send them, if it's like an after school program, like they'll have them like tutor the kids or work with the kids or whatever. My students are obviously all the grant writing students, but even there, they are frequently the only one in their section. They'll go to the Collaborative for a recitation and they're the only grant writer, because again, there's just not enough of us. So I'm doing my part. I'm going to graduate another 22 this semester. And, you know, hopefully that soon you'll start seeing them sort of in the pipeline of looking for jobs and working with your nonprofits. But thank you all for being here.
thank you so much. And Lori, I'll ask Stacey that question and I'll get you the answer to that because I know I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. And thank you all very much for coming on. Just a couple of quick notes here. I do want to know what other topics you want to hear about, right? I always want to make sure I'm bringing in speakers on topics that are important to you. That's what this is for. So please, when I send out the meeting minutes to this and the recording, please also share with me what topics or speakers have you heard that you'd like to see come on here. Also, on May 18th, again, why insurance matters. And if you haven't heard, on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast that I run, I just interviewed last week Michelle Sakurka, who you just heard speak a little while ago. So take a listen to that. She says some amazing things during that interview. And any other questions? I see there are other questions from Lori. Stacey is going to be taking a look at those. And Stacey, thanks for putting in your information. I will be taking a snapshot of the chat box. And I want to thank everybody for coming on. And thank you again to Stacey. Have a great month, everybody, and I'll see you next month, May 18th. Don't forget, okay? See you soon, everyone.